Hi, I'm Kyle Flicky, an ecologist, and today I'm going to be taking you on a tour of some prairie remnants throughout the state of Ohio. Now, prairies are interesting because of their great diversity of plants, which are very colorful. And to this day, there are only a few prairie remnants remaining of what was considered one of the best habitats throughout the western portion of the state. On the first stop of our journey, we're going to be looking at the Huffman Prairie located in Dayton, Ohio. Now, this prairie has a lot of historical significance. As you can see behind me, you can see the hangar for the Wright brothers where they stored their first plane. Now, around this prairie is where the Wright brothers conducted countless flights where they've accomplished goals such as their first turn and first figure eight performed in the air. Now we'll take a look at the purple coneflower, and first we'll start by looking at the leaves. We can see that they're lance-shaped, which they are long and narrow, and if we touch them just to feel, they are rough, and that's because they are covered in fine lunate hairs. As we move up the flowering stalk, we can see that these leaves are alternately arranged. Eventually we get to this bright purple pinkish flower head, which the name coneflower comes from. Now, to break a coneflower down is it has this center portion, which is known as the cone. And this is where all the actual flowers are contained. Eventually, when they become pollinated, this is where all the seeds will be dispersed by the wind later in the season. Now, these are ray flowers that come out in a disc shape, and as the purple coneflower ages, they become recurved or they curve downward, which we can see here. Now, if we take a closer look at the whorl catchfly leaves, we can see that they are oppositely arranged. However, if we move up another rank in the leaves, we can see that they are turned perpendicular, but they remain that opposite leaf formation. Looking at the stem here and working up the flower stalk, we can see that it is fuzzy, covered in hairs, which gives it a soft prickle feel. And we get up to the flowering inflorescence, which is pictured here. We can see that there are 5 bright petals that come out in a star formation, which helps guide pollinators such as the hummingbird directly into the flowering parts. An interesting fact about the whorl catchfly is, if we look at this portion here, which is known as a calyx, which is a protective housing unit for the flowering parts and petals, we can see that it is sticky to catch climbing insects from damaging or eating the flowers that are waiting to be pollinated. Another color variation they can have is pink. Looking at the leaves of dense blazing star, we can see that they are long and linear, and they almost appear to be in a whorl, but they're actually alternate. As we move up the stalk here, we can see that the leaves become smaller, and it gives rise to this beautiful spike that is purple colored. Now, this spike actually flowers at the top first, and as we go throughout the flowering season, the bottom flowers will begin to open up, which we can see here. Within each individual clusters of flowers, we can see that they're pink, and each individual flower has 5 petals. For our second stop, we're at the Milford Center State Nature Preserve. As you can see behind me, this State Nature Preserve is confined to a utility right-of-way. Now, part of this prairie is protected and still existing here because of this power line right-of-way, as the power line company makes recent clearings to help preserve the prairie plants. Here is Prairie Dock, which is one of the tallest plants you can find in the prairie. But to begin with, let's look at its massive basil leaves that it has here. Now, basil leaves are just leaves that grow out of the ground, which this plant has. And you can see by looking at one of them, that's leaf, very sandpapery texture. And it's also cordate shaped, as you can see here, which it has these 2 lobes right by a leaf stalk. As we move up this giant flowering stalk, which you can see is leafless, it gives rise to these nice bright yellow flowers. Upon a closer look at the flower of Prairie Dock, we can see that it's made up of many disc florets, which are in the center portion, and on the outside these bright yellow structures, which are the ray florets. Here we have wild Petunia, and you can see that it has 5 lobes on the outside edge of the flower. And this flower is actually made up of a tube-like structure, which you can see here. That is also known as a corolla, and down within the corolla you can see these parallel veins that go down to where all its pollination parts are. Now here we have flowering spurge. Let's take a closer look at some of its characteristics. The leaves of flowering spurge, which you can see here, they're long and linear. They are also glaucous or smooth, and around the margins they do not have teeth or on the outside edges. Now if we zoom out and look at a flower, we can see they're very tiny compared to my fingertip. Also, they're made up of white petals, which there are 5 of them. And on the inside, little green circle. Here we have a tinier prairie plant. This is nodding onion, and we can see that the flower head here is actually nodding, and that's where it gets its name from. Upon a closer look at this firework display of its flowers, we can see that they have 6 petals, and we can see these yellow anthers sticking out. Next, we're in Northeast Ohio at Springfield Bog Metropark, which is located just outside of Akron. Now, a unique thing about this park is it contains a remnant bog that were from the early settler days. And around those times, early settlers noted that prairies were often associated with these bogs. As you can see behind me, the Metro Park decided to create and restore prairie habitat, which would have once been here back in the early settler days. Another unique thing about this Metro Park is it's at the Continental Divide in Ohio between the Great Lakes, which are to the north, and the Ohio River, which is to the south. So let's go take a look at some of the plants that thrive here. So for one of the lower growing prairie plants here, this is Rattlesnake Master. If we take a look at these long linear leaves, and the texture of them is kind of strappy or leathery, they have these unique hairs that are found on the outside or on the margins of the leaves, which are probably used to defend themselves against predators that would eat on them. As we move up and we get to the inflorescence here, we can see that these heads, flower heads, are branched, and they're white, and they're made up of tiny individual flowers. And now an interesting fact about Rattlesnake Master is when these flower heads are dried, Native Americans used to use them as actual rattles. And another thought to the name Rattlesnake Master is its tubers or roots were actually dried and thought to cure rattlesnake bites, but that, however, has not been proven. Here we have white wild indigo. Now, starting from the base of the plant, we can see that it has this long, erect stem. Moving upward, we have this branching alternate pattern where it gives rise to these 3 leaf slits that are together. Its signature indigo leaf pattern. As we move up in the whole spike or inflorescence here, we can see that these pea flowers flower from the bottom first. As the season moves on, they start flowering towards the top. And if we take a closer look at one of these white individual flowers, we can see that they're pea flowers for the specific reason that they have this top V portion that's known as a standard. Now on the outsides it has this keel shaped, kind of like a keel of a boat. Now the genus indigos are known for their use of dyes by early settlers and Native Americans. Now we've stumbled upon a nice population of wild bergamot. And to identify this plant, we'll actually start below ground, which it has 2 root systems. One that's deep roots, which provides a lot of the nutrients and stores a lot of them, and also searches for water for the plant. It also has a shallow root system which creates rhizomatous roots, which helps form these dense clusters as you can see behind me. If we take a closer look at the plant, we can see that the stem is four-angled. It's kind of like a square. It has four sides. We move up to the leaves, and we can see that they were opposite in appearance. Then we move up to this beautiful flower, which it is made up of these individual lavender flowers, and it forms a wreath formation, which the inside of the cone or head flowering first, and the flowers travel to the outside later throughout the season. And the unique portion of wild bergamot is, if you break a leaf off and smell it, it has a wonderful odor to it. On our last stop on our prairie prowl, we are at Prairie Oaks Metroparks in Columbus, Ohio, and it's a perfect ending just at sunset, as we can see the gray-headed coneflower pictured here. If we take a close look at one of the individual flowers, we can see these bright yellow petals curving downward or reflexed, and it gets its name gray-headed coneflower from its disc, which is this portion up here, is actually gray colored. Now this gray color appears after its disc florets or flowers fall off after they are pollinated. As we move down the plant, we can see that its leaves, which we can see down here, are pinnately divided, which they have a division here, 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 and so on.